Welcome back to the Legacy Radio Network. We're chatting today with Leslie Paige. Leslie is with the organization Citizens Against Government Waste. We've been talking to her about what's going to happen with regard to the fiscal cliff, and I want to shift gears here in this segment because, Leslie, your organization recently issued a press release calling for Congress to stop the next bailout, which would be the bailout of the United States Postal Service. I'm looking
among others.
Yeah, we'll talk about all those if we have time. I'm reading your press release, and it says that the U.S. Postal Service announced yesterday that in fiscal year 2012, which ended on October 30, just less than a month ago, the Postal Service lost $15.9 billion. And, it seems to me, Leslie, last time we talked that the United States Postal Service had actually proposed a solution, and Congress ignored it. So what's going on?
Well, let's do an overview. First of all, $15.9 billion is record losses for them. And they are showing, and as we all know, and this is not a secret, and it's been an ongoing trajectory for quite a few years, that there is a lot of volume dropping, meaning that they're dropping a lot of regular first-class mail volume is dropping by 4%. Last year it was 4% they dropped, but it's steadily declining for obvious reasons: email, texting, all kinds of electronic communications, and so this is a business model that is not really tooled to 21st century communication. I think we can say that with certainty. So we've seen this been going on, and as with all bailouts, with all financial distress in our particular country, you see it coming for years, and nobody does anything about it. And that's what's going on with the Postal Service. It sounds familiar, doesn't it? It's the same thing we're talking about with our national debt. Okay, so basically, the Postal Service has lost an enormous amount of money, and they are going to continue to lose money. Now, current postal management wants some flexibility. They have been asking Congress to pass some legislation that will free them to do some things. Here are some of the things they want to do. They want to go to a 5-day delivery service, which, is a sea change for most people, particularly rural America, particularly seniors. Now, the postal unions and the postal workers are claiming this is going to be a massive cut in employees. I don't know about that. I think it would also potentially make them more efficient if they had the freedom to revamp the work rules and move people around and deal with their facilities. That's the other thing they want to do. The postal management wants to consolidate and close underperforming facilities. That would be postal offices, distribution facilities, all kinds of facilities, all kinds of bricks and mortar buildings that they have all over the country. They have too many. They've got a surplus of this. And we've got huge percentages of these small postal facilities are not profitable. They haven't been profitable in years. They just don't make money. They don't service a very large density population. And the Postal Service wants the ability to do what any business would do, which is to right size its facilities so it can meet the true needs of its customers.
Leslie, let me stop you right there if I could. Let me stop you right there, because if Congress has been asked by the Postal Service, the management of the Postal Service, to let them do what needs to be done, why are we talking about this?
Dennis, you should know better than that. Because
I just wanted to hear your answer.
I know, but we've got a very large group of stakeholders here and a very big pushback from postal unions. The Postal Service has quite a few very large unions that do not want to see any change in the amount of employees they have or the amount of facilities they have, and they certainly don't want the Postal Service to have the position, the power, the authority, which is sort of bizarre because, that's what they're doing, is they're trying to manage this huge behemoth of a quote-unquote company. If it were a private sector business, it would be massive. And they need that flexibility. Postal employees, which are mostly union employees, do not want to have the postal management to have that kind of flexibility because it probably would mean some job changes and job losses. They'd have to right-size the operation to meet the actual needs of the postal mailing public. Now, they also want some other things. The postal management, they want some relief from pre-funding their retirement benefits. And there's some arguments, some very, very valid arguments being made on both sides about that. And they lost $15.9 billion. A certain percentage of that had to do with pre-funding their retirement funds, which they are required to do by law. And they claim that they overpaid by $11 billion into their retirement and health care funds for their employees in the future. They are claiming no other private sector companies were forced to do that, and if they had that money, if they had that $11 billion, which they feel they're entitled to, they would not have lost as much money. They'd still have lost $4.8 billion, though. I mean, it's not like it's a win-win.
It's not like it makes them instantly
still are going
profitable.
In the wrong direction.
Yeah, really.
Well, and there's still the trajectory of the entire operation is still downward. So there are bills in Congress to address this, but they're very different bills. The Senate bill would give them their $11 billion, would let them have access to that money without requiring any structural changes, whatever. And it would also push off into the future the ability for them, for the postal management people to make changes to the facilities, meaning they would not be able to close any post offices for quite a while. They'd have to hold off on that. Keep in mind, Dennis, postal facilities are very politicized. Congress has their hand in this all over it. They like to have postal facilities in their district, and they are not happy when there are closures. You ask yourself, why in the world would a congressman care? I mean, but they get a lot of pushback from their constituents when facilities have to close. People don't like to make big changes in their lives. And if you have a little postal service that isn't a postal facility in your area that's not doing well, and they want to close it, the amount of pressure that a member of Congress comes under is quite substantial. And they like to have their names on buildings, and they like to have photo opportunities to open buildings, and so they themselves, Congress themselves, has politicized that process to an absurd degree.
Yeah, let's say
so the Senate bill would just give them access to the funds without really forcing them into anything in terms of structural changes.
Okay.
The House bill, which is the alternative bill, would actually force structural changes. It would allow the Postal Service to have the flexibility, et cetera, et cetera.
So
there's
more.
There's going to be a fight over this.
And more. It sounds like more gridlock.
Yeah. Well, potentially. I mean, they have got to do it. They've reached their borrowing limit. They have a $15 billion borrowing limit, and the Postal Service has reached it statutorily. They're capped, and so now they have to do something. And we should do something. I mean, and not just something. We should do something sensible, something reasonable. But as with everything else in our country right now, there's a lot of delay and defer and deflect. And when that happens, the pain just gets worse the further down you go. We've known about postal losses for years.
Absolutely right. I mean, this is just kind of a microcosm of the country at large. And then we have our Treasury Secretary, Tim Geithner, this past week, who came out and said that we should just do away with the debt ceiling. It should just be infinite. We should just be able to spend all the money we want, which was asinine. But let me get off my soapbox.
I think that should scare everybody a little bit. I mean, there has to be some consequences for raising that debt ceiling. And you know what? I think the American people need to be able to see what is happening. This is the only way they see it, is when we have these fights over the debt ceiling. If they didn't, they'd just be raising it quietly as we're going along, and the average American would be unaware of it.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And Leslie, I want to shift gears here in the time we have left, because you also issued a press release, or your organization did, that Senator Tom Coburn, who is from Oklahoma, released a report titled "The Department of Everything," and he's proposing some changes that would save taxpayers about $67.9 billion over 10 years by taking some non-essential, to use a mild term, expenditures within the Department of Defense and transferring them elsewhere. Can you comment on the Senator's report?
Well, yeah, sure. And let me just say that if taxpayers are looking for a hero or someone who is doing their job in the Senate and the House in terms of oversight, which is really the mission and mandate of our Congress, it is Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma. He has been an absolutely stalwart taxpayer champion. And this is only one of several reports he's done. I would say in the course of the last 3 years, he's done at least 6 on duplication, mismanagement, waste at the National Science Foundation. I mean, he's got an amazing amount of resources on his website. So if you're interested in just seeing some of this, I would encourage people to go check it out on Senator Coburn's website. This one is particularly interesting because, you know, a lot of people are worried about the sequestration coming along, which is basically the cuts that are mandated to happen, the spending cuts that are mandated to happen in January, both to our domestic discretionary spending and also to our defense spending. And there's a huge amount of screaming and yelling, and some of it may be warranted about how much money they're going to cut out of the Defense Department. I mean, even Leon Panetta, our Defense Secretary, has said that these would be devastating, and we have to rethink the way, you know, whether we want to do this, whether we really want to cut this much, and also how we do it. It's very important, you know, that it's done correctly. You don't just take an axe to the Defense Department. On the other hand, okay, having said all that, I want to assure taxpayers that there's a tremendous amount of waste in the Defense Department. And what Coburn has done here is he's looked at the low-hanging fruit. He basically identified $67.9 billion over 10 years. Now, that is not a huge amount of money when you amortize it per year. You know, it's basically $6.8 billion a year. That's not huge, but it's a beginning, and it really opens the door to some questions about what the money is being spent on. A couple of points. Keep in mind the Defense Department has never been audited properly. They are not. The GAO has repeatedly said the DOD is not auditable. They can't be audited because they're just so dysfunctional financially. The items that Coburn has identified are not programmatic waste, meaning these are not weapon systems necessarily that he's talking about. These are things like non-military related research. It's education programs. The DOD runs almost $15 billion worth of education programs, including some STEM programs, which is the science, technology, and math programs that duplicate what the Department of Education and the states are already doing. He also has identified $700 million in quote-unquote green energy programs that really don't have much to do with fighting wars and keeping our war fighters the best trained and the best equipped in the world. And he thinks $700 million of that could be, you know, excised. The commissary system, which everyone is quite, you know, attached to, but that's $9 billion over a 10-year period that could be saved in the commissary system, which, you know, basically is the DOD running grocery stores in areas where there are plenty of retail operations and plenty of opportunities for military people to get what they need at military, outside of military facilities and, you know, at your basic grocery stores. And even if they were to, you know, and keep in mind commissaries were something that were started back in the 1800s when you were trying to help our military folks get what they needed, and you didn't want them to travel long distances, and if they were in rural areas, you know, to be without a decent place to shop for groceries and or other items that they needed. Nowadays, though, I mean, that's a rarity. Most their bases are close to urban environments or have opportunities to buy stuff at urban and you know, retail operations all over the country.
Yeah, Leslie, we're going to have to leave it there. We are out of time, but I appreciate you being on the program today. This is Everything Financial Radio on the Legacy Radio Network. We'll be back after these words.